This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
After creating a few little things like an international banking system and an alternative economy, the Messianic believers in Spain also created their own navy to battle the Spanish Inquisition. Dr. Miles Jones explains how these good guy pirates defeated evil on the high seas, because it's the end of the sixth day, the sun is set, and this is Shabbat Not Live.
As they take this message out into the world.
Well, Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans. Welcome to Shabbat Not Live with Michael Rood. Why am I saying it that way? Because Michael Rood's in the studio with us today, and he always told me it's Shabbat Not Live. You guys are recording this. It's not live anymore. Good point. All right. Well, is there anything in world history the Messianic Church did not do? As we've discovered over the last few episodes of Pirates and Heretics with Dr. Miles Jones, the Messianics were pirates. They started the Renaissance. St. Patrick was a Messianic, for goodness sake. And tonight, we are going to find out how they created an international banking system. No kidding. But first, let's take a look at the astronomically and agriculturally corrected biblical Hebrew calendar. There you have it right there. We are on the third Shabbat of the 13th month, called Adar Bet. And that means our Passover event is next month. Let's talk about that with my co-host, the Chief Operating Officer of A Rood Awakening International, Ted Clayton.
Well, thank you, Scott. But for some reason with that title, I feel like we ought to be going, "Arr, ya matey."
Oh, arr, yes. Pirates and Heretics.
I know if Michael were sitting here instead of over there, he probably would do that.
You know what a Passover in pirate land is? It's Passover.
Oh gosh,
so
please let's move on. We got to move on from this. Ladies and gentlemen, to get us out of this terrible mess we've gotten ourselves into, know that Passover is going to be in the month of April. It's going to be April 15th and 16th because an Adar Bet has taken place, and we're going to have great guests once again with you. We're going to have Yehuda and Hadass Glick is going to be here with Keith Johnson and Scott, and we're going to have Nehemiah and Linnell Gordon. They're going to be with us. Keith and Nehemiah is going to do a great segment, and also we're going to have our panel discussion once again, backed by popular demand. It's going to be Scott Laird, myself, Keith, and Nehemiah, and we're going to talk about Passover, how it was then, how it should be celebrated now. And don't forget, at 7 o'clock, we have that world-famous Seder with Michael Rood going to be right there with us. Put your television at the end of your table and be there and celebrate Michael's Seder right there on the table with you guys. So he's right there in your home. Ladies and gentlemen, don't miss a single moment of the Passover 2022, Passover then and now. And Scott, tell us once again how we register to watch Passover.
We go to PassoverCharlotte.com, real easy. It's on the bottom of your screen there. We need to do that because we're going to send you several things, including the code to watch it and the URL to go to. So you need to have that. You need to have a couple other things as well, and we'll give you any updates as well. So sign up for free at PassoverCharlotte.com. And you know, Ted, this was supposed to be the day that we were going to have Passover if it was not an Adar Bet.
That's right.
If the barley was Aviv on March 3rd.
Yeah.
But it indeed was not.
Now, tell us about that once again, Scott, because I know some people still have trouble understanding what an Adar Bet is and how they discover that there should be an Adar Bet. So tell us about that again.
Well, first of all, okay, so you've got 12 months in the calendar, which seems kind of normal compared to our calendar, right? So you have the 12th month, but at the end of the 12th month, of course, the Hebrew months are started when you see the first sliver of the new moon.
Right.
And so if at that point, you need two things to happen in order for the first month to come around, the month of the Aviv.
Yes.
That's why it's the Aviv barley.
Yes.
And so you need two things. You need the moon to be seen,
right,
of course, and secondly, for the barley to be Aviv.
Now, Aviv, what does that mean?
So that means, it doesn't mean ripe. It means kind of half ripe.
Okay.
They are anticipating doing a an offering of bread at the Feast of First Fruits, which follows Passover. So Passover is roughly 2 weeks into the month of the Aviv.
Yes.
So they are looking at the barley right before that time to figure out if it is going to be ripe enough to harvest in order to do this bread offering at the first fruits, because that's the first fruits of the harvest go to Yehovah. And so that has to happen. And so if you can't have that, well, you can't have Passover before that. So what do? You have to add some more time to allow that barley to mature.
Gotcha.
So that's where the 13th month comes in. And this is Adar Bet.
Now, that's in their calendar, correct? They can see it in their calendar.
Yeah, it's the 13th month, right there, 13th month. And so that's what we're doing right now. And so the 13th month is Adar Bet because Bet means two. It's second letter of the Hebrew alphabet, so Adar Bet. It's basically Adar Part 2.
Good.
This is what it is.
Excellent. So now you know, ladies and gentlemen, you want to watch it in April. Now, those dates again in April are
15 and 16.
15 and 16, so that's great. Once again, we have great panels, great guests, ladies and gentlemen. And don't forget, you'll get to see Michael's world-famous Seder at 7 o'clock that night. You're not going to want to miss a single moment of Passover then and now. And Scott, also, speaking of Passover then and now, we have a great love gift that's happening this month as well with our good friend Bill Cloud. Tell us about that.
Yeah, you don't want to miss this with all the excitement of Passover coming up. So first sign up for Passover and then do this. Get the love gift with Bill Cloud. So this love gift helps finance things at the ministry, and it's a gift from Michael to you to say thank you for supporting the ministry. You're not buying the teaching, we're giving it to you as a gift. And this month, Bill Cloud actually came in and said, hey, I want to help you guys do this because I know as Michael is almost ready but not quite ready to come on the stage yet, so let me pinch hit for him. So that's what he did. And he came up here and he did a teaching called Whom Will You Serve? And it's all about man's laws versus God's laws, and when they conflict, what are you going to do? And
boy, I tell you, right now, ladies and gentlemen, that is a great teaching for a time such as this, because with all the happenings out there in the world right now, all the mass confusion that's taking place, you need to know, do you follow man's laws or do you follow the Almighty's laws? And this is going to give you a great pathway to following the Almighty's laws.
Exactly, indeed. And if you think that this is not going to come to your doorstep, if we know anything about world events, and if you know anything about Revelation, you know these are going to come together sooner or later, so you might as well decide in your mind now what you are going to do. Get that teaching from Bill Cloud, watch it, rewatch it. Just get it solidified in your head. What will you do when the brimstone hits the fan, as Michael calls it?
Now, there's some other things they get also. If they give to the $100 level, they get this beautiful Kiddush cup, this silver Kiddush cup with Jerusalem on it. And if that wasn't enough, ladies and gentlemen, if you give at the $300 amount, you get this wonderful bookend of, what describe the bookend?
It's the Western Wall.
Oh, that's right.
Shofar blowing at the Western Wall. It's a beautiful thing. It's one of those bookends that you only need one of, and you put the books against the end of your shelf on the other. So.
Well, so don't forget this. Get these love gifts, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great way to share your faith.
All right. Thank you very much, Ted. All right. So after creating an international banking system and alternative economy, the Messianic believers in Spain also created just a little thing called their own navy to battle the Spanish Inquisition. Pirates and Heretics, Episode 4 with Dr. Miles Jones is coming up. The Kiddush with Michael, however, is next.
When measured against the word of Yehovah, some of man's laws are lawless, and there will soon come a point when you must decide whom you will serve. Using examples from the Torah, the New Testament, and from yesterday's headlines, Bill Cloud draws a striking parallel between the decisions made by heroes of the Bible and the decisions facing us in our modern world. In this month's love gift, whom will you serve?
This is what I see taking shape, Scott. It is going to get to the point that we're going to have to make up our mind who we are more willing to offend, man or the Almighty.
Who Will You Serve, featuring special guest Bill Cloud, is not for sale, and it's not on YouTube. The only way to watch it is to receive it as a thank you gift from Michael Rood. Donate a $50 love gift, and we'll send you Whom Will You Serve on DVD or Blu-ray. Or for a donation of $100, we'll send you Whom Will You Serve, plus a silver-plated Kiddush cup and coaster with scenes of Old Jerusalem. Or with a donation of $300, we'll send you Whom Will You Serve, the silver-plated Kiddush cup and coaster, plus a decorative bookend depicting a scene of worship at the Western Wall. These gifts are a limited-time offer from Michael Rood to thank you for your support. Make your donation today and receive the $50 gift, the $100 gift, or the $300 gift. These special gift collections featuring Bill Cloud are available only in March, and supplies are limited. Call now to receive your gifts. 888-766-3610. That's 888-766-3610. Or get your gifts online at monthlylovegift.com.
When Yeshua fed the 5,000 with leavened barley loaves in the Galilee, the Pharisees came down on him because they accused him that he and his disciples did not wash their hands before they ate bread. They did not wash their hands with a negelvesser and say this prayer, "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us by your commandments, commanding us concerning the washing of hands." Why didn't Yeshua do that? Why didn't his disciples follow that? Because it is takanot. It is a law which they invented, and Moses said no one is ever allowed to add to or subtract from. But the night of the Last Supper, Yeshua took bread and he put in place a rehearsal that was really put in place by the Kohen Gadol, the high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek himself brought forth bread and wine to Abraham, and Yeshua interpreted that very thing. Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem mi'aretz. This is what Yeshua put in place, that before we eat bread, that we say this prayer. And as often as we do this, we do it in remembrance of him, because his broken body was broken for us, and by his stripes we were healed. So as often as we do this, as often we do it in remembrance of him. And Yeshua took the cup and he said, Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei Pri Hagafen. The creator of the fruit of the vine, Yehovah, created the fruit of the vine. He said, this represents the renewed covenant in my blood. As often as you do this, remember me. And remember, I will be drinking this with you at the marriage supper of the Lamb. Shabbat Shalom.
So our floor director here at Shabbat Night Live just told me a joke. He said, what's a pirate's favorite letter? I said, of course, R being the obvious answer. He said, no. It's C, the C. And I'm like, oh, that's a great joke. Anyway, we're talking all about pirates. Why are we talking about pirates? Because pirates, Messianics, the history of the world, there's a huge part played there by Messianic folks who carried the Hebrew Gospels down through the ages. And here to tell us more about it is Dr. Miles Jones.
An unknown history.
Yes.
Because the Messianic church is not supposed to exist.
Right.
After it was declared heretic in the 4th century, that according to the church history, which is controlled by the apostate church, right? The Roman church. They're declared heretic. According to church history, they disappeared in the 5th century, right? Of course, like good boys and girls that are declared heretic, they just go away, all right? Well, that did not happen. They went in underground, but they had profound effect on world history. I mean, any of you that are watching this, seeing these are major accomplishments, right, that we're talking about here. And you're jumping the gun again, jumping to the pirates. We're going to get to that this episode.
We'll get a second half of today. We'll get there.
We're going to get to that. But first, we're going to talk about the Reformation. And if you haven't kept up, you can go on my website, writingofgod.com, free download, and we'll give you a PDF that summarizes all these 16 major accomplishments of the Messianic Church through the 20 centuries through 16 centuries from the time of Constantine. Well, the whole business, through the 2,000 years since they began. And and that's completely free. But please, buy the book, support the ministry. The Messianic Church are Rising, Volume 2 of Sons of Zion versus Sons of Greek. It's in publication now.
Recently published it. And get it from the website. You can get it from Amazon, but we know that Amazon takes a significant cut. We'd rather have folks get it from you because it supports your ministry a lot better.
We make 3 times as much.
Yeah,
and
there
it's
you
a
go.
huge amount.
Yeah.
And it doesn't cost you anymore. And you get on our research updates newsletter for free.
Oh, perfect.
So we'll send you information when new information comes out or new things are available.
And that free download is all 16 things we are talking about in this series. And today we start with number
pictures.
13. Yeah, with pictures.
So number 13.
Yes.
We talked about the Renaissance, which is a major thing. I mean, you could write a book or volumes on each one of these things, like the Renaissance. What a huge thing. But the Reformation came out of the Renaissance, all right? And the Reformation, there are 2 reasons the Reformation worked. There had been other reformers before Martin Luther. We talked about Martin Luther, and one of the most incredible things about it is they recovered the scripture, the Bibles of the received text of the Bible, from 2 sources, from the Waldensians who had preserved it, and from the Greek church in Constantinople. Mehmet II, the Sultan Mehmet, the Ottoman Turks, took it over 1453, and then opened up commerce and libraries to the West. So now all of a sudden you have these manuscripts of Lucian's Greek Bible, the received text of the Bible, all of a sudden that they had tried to eliminate in Western Europe because they weren't Roman Church. And Roman Church had done the Eusebius Greek Bible, 1320, and Jerome's Latin Vulgate in 380, which were not the first Bibles, right? The first Bible was the Atala in 150, complete compilation of the Bible in Latin, but it came from the Hebrew Gospels and the Tanakh, right? And then Lucian's Greek Bible, which came from the Itala, the Tanakh, the Hebrew Gospels, because Lucian was a Greek speaker, and reader, and writer, probably Jewish Christian, because, I mean, who else knows Hebrew? I mean, like Columbus, he knew Hebrew. I mean, come on, dead giveaway, right? Yeah. And all these people are, it's trying to keep it quiet. So that's where the Bibles, Reformation Bibles, came from. And remember that the Reformation Bibles and the printing press were the 2 things that made the Reformation successful. Printing press was practically brand new in the 1500s. It had been since 1450, but it took a while for the technology to spread. But by 1500, Luther put out more publications than the next 17 leading reformers altogether.
Wow.
So he made dramatic use of the printing press. A huge, huge factor in his success, right? The other was they recovered the received text of the Bible from the Waldensians in the Italic Sea, northern Italy, right? Who had preserved it with their blood, with their lives, they'd preserved it, right? And from Constantinople, the manuscripts of the Lucian's Greek Bible, right? But I wanted to read you this quotation because it's so crucial and so critical. It's by Hugo Schoenfeld, who wrote The History of Jewish Christianity. It says, behind the Reformation, as behind almost every spiritual movement of note, one finds the personality of a Jewish Christian.
How about that?
I mean, it's true, but it's remarkable because they were the thinkers. They were the most educated. So every movement in just about every field, you're going to have conversos and Jews involved in it as prime players. Well, in this case, however, the person that Hugo Schoenfeld was specifically referring to was Nicholas of Lyra, all right? And Nicholas of Lyra was a Jewish convert, and he had been raised in the Hebrew educational tradition, as were most conversos, most Messianics were. And so he was a very famous Talmudist, and he was converted to Christianity, and he pretty much wrote a synthesis of the Old Testament and the New Testament to show how they were in complete balance, according to what he called the corrected principles. And I mean, this is a schism, a schizophrenic schism, if you will, that dramatically affects us even today. How do you balance these two things? You know, this accusation of being a Judaizer, Jewish things, that's bad. That would include the entire Old Testament, right? So you've got the split personality. One that wants to deny the Old Testament and the Torah and toss it out the window, which they did for most of the history. Okay, and then you've got this renewed covenant coming along that's all about Yeshua, but Yeshua was a Hebrew rabbi too. So you're trying to embrace him and reject him at the same time. This is called schizophrenia, two distinct personalities that are sometimes diametrically opposed. And most people are not even aware of it. You got this thing going off. Well, Nicholas of Lyra was the thinker that said these things are not in opposition at all. All right? You just got to look at them in the right way, and that would be the Messianic way, right? This so influenced the thinking of Martin Luther that it was said about him. It was the Bishop of Naumburg who penned this, but it's a very famous couplet, and it says, "If Lyra had not written, Luther would not have come forth." That was how dramatic his influence upon Martin Luther's thinking. He was a couple of centuries before him, but his thinking was so profound.
And it's funny, everyone knows of Martin.
It set the theological basis for the Reformation.
Everybody knows Martin Luther, but I never heard of Nicholas of Lyra.
Yeah.
He's been, like you said, with everything else of this nature, buried.
Yeah, it's just been pretty much effaced. I was amazed when I started digging into it at all the documentation that I found on these people. It frankly blew me away, to be honest with you. But the Waldensians, they had preserved these Gospels with their blood. The Reformation Bibles, in fact, they came out one by one. And remember, these Bibles, one of the significant things about them, not only were they recovered from the received text, from the Waldensians and Lucian's Greek text, Erasmus translated this into Greek. It was a Greek, but it was from the received text. And the Reformation Bibles were based on this. The 1611 King James Version, for example, was a Reformation Bible. But they began coming out. There was a group of these reformers in Geneva, and they were interacting with the Waldensians there. John Calvin came there, John Knox was there, Wycliffe was there. So Martin Luther went there too, and they were basing their scriptures on their Waldensian connection. Olivetan wrote the Old French Bible, which was the earliest in the French language. He was a Waldensian pastor.
Oh.
So these people were all definitely, it was all a Waldensian Christian conclave going on here, the Neo-Messianic church that had preserved these scriptures, and it was all happening in Geneva. All right, so the Reformation Bibles, they came out, Deodatus Italian Bible, the Geneva Bible.
There's a familiar name.
That was the foremost Bible of the colonies, the American colonies, the Geneva Bible. It was a Reformation Bible. So you had Luther's Bible. Luther's Bible was very definitely from the received text of the Bible, from his encounter with the Waldensians. So all of these Bibles, they were based on the received text of the Bible, gotten from and the Reformers were just amazed. They were just amazed. They didn't know. And then all of them came to Geneva and started doing this work in the Reformation. So we're going to look at these. Erasmus was the first one to start explaining that there are two streams of Bibles. One that came from the Itala and Lucian's Greek Bible, which were earlier than the Catholic Bibles, Eusebius' Greek Bible and Jerome's Vulgate, which happened in the 4th century. Itala was the 2nd century. And Lucian's Greek Bible, who was most likely Jewish Christian himself because he knew Hebrew, was in the late 3rd century, maybe 280, 290. Right? So why did you need another? And it was received, it's called the received text, but because it was received by all the congregations throughout the world as the authentic text of the Bible. It was an inspired text, and it was received every church. It took 1,000 years for the Catholic Bibles, the Vulgate, for example, to really overcome that lead. And generally that was done by military force of arms. But you have the Itala, and then Jerome's Latin Vulgate came along in 380, but the Itala was in 150, way earlier. Lucian Greek text, 30, 40 years before Eusebius Greek text. The Wycliffe English Bible, now, this was in 1382. This was a direct translation from Jerome's Vulgate, but still, it was in the vernacular language. So it counts as Reformation Bible, although it did come from the Catholic column just in English. So he was he was a reformer and advocated many of these Messianic principles and theologies and things we're talking about and ideas. So he was very definitely a reformer himself. But the Bible was a direct translation from the Vulgate. But then you had the Erasmus Greek New Testament, long before the Codex Sinaiticus came out, the Tyndale English, which was based on the received text. All of these came before, so you have two streams. One that came from the received text in the Hebrew Gospels and the Tanakh, and the other that were the Roman Catholic versions. And the reason that there are different Bibles is because they changed things to support their doctrine. It's that simple. In fact, when they reinstated these Bibles from the Codex Sinaiticus, which was a Catholic Bible, right, Eusebius Greek text, when the new spirit of ecumenicalism came in, after a couple of centuries of very serious, religious war, like the 30 Years' War, that wiped out half the population of Central Europe, literally. We're all going to be big buddies, and we're going to get along together, and they form committees, and we're going to come up with a version of the Bible that we can all agree on. And they used the Codex Sinaiticus. So they changed all these Reformation Bibles back into the Roman column with these Bible committees, made more than 3,000 changes to the Bible. So they go back into the Catholic column, the ones we're using today. The modern, and they all followed along. They all followed suit. So keep that in mind. We have to get back to the received text of the Bible that the Reformers gave us with their blood, right? So those are the two streams. And there'll be more on this. The Messianics were the first discoverers, explorers, and settlers of the New World. We already talked about Gaspar the Pilot, but he was by far the only, usually it was a Messianic pilot, because the Jews they had invented and improved on the astrolabe. It's originally from Arabia, from North Africa. And so they were the ones who knew how to use it. It was fairly complex. So they educated once. So the pilots were usually, and the navigators were usually conversos, right? So they were right up front in the discovery of the New World, Columbus, and the discovery of South America by a ship that had been blown off course, right? That was Pedro Cabral. Actually, I think I misnamed that earlier. But he was trying to get to Calcutta. Right?
Right, it got blown off course, and then,
But then he later didn't make it to Calcutta. That's where he picked up on Moncade, the converso, right? And he served as his pilot coming back, and they had what we called, they encountered the fleet of Amerigo Vespucci and told him everything about the route to the east and the route to the west, because they'd just been blown off course to Brazil. Okay, so Moncade, the pilot, Gaspar, he changed his name when he was rebaptized. So he was the guy who opened up the trade route to the east and the trade route to the west. This one converso pilot. Right? So we already discussed that, but there were others. We know there were people on Columbus' ships, and he left a colony of 39 people there, right? Many of which were conversos, right? And they split into two factions because the old Spanish started taking men's wives and taking their gold, and they're no longer bartering. They're just taking it, and they'd kill them, you know. And
Did you tell me this was in Haiti, or what is now known as Haiti?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was in the Dominican Republic. It's called Hispaniola Island. And so, obviously, this is calling outrage among the Indians who fought back. You know, since they were divided into two groups, it's pretty easy. They had self-isolated because the conversos didn't want to have anything to do with these outrages. And this, I don't know all of this for sure, but I know they were divided into those two groups. And it was the Spanish seamen were committing these outrages because the conversos were of a different stripe. You know, they had been mistreated, and they were coming to escape that. They were not trying to bring that to the New World. Okay, so they wiped out this entire colony, and they were easy to do, to isolate and ambush because they were already fighting each other, all right? But they were settlers in the very first colony, and all the others were primarily settled by conversos. I mean, as many as 15% of the settlers in every New World colony were conversos, Messianics.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a large percentage, really.
It's huge. But in the islands, it was more. Like on the island of Jamaica, like 50% of the population were Messianics.
Wow.
Yeah, that's why it became the pirate capital of the world. Because the merchants of Jamaica, they financed the pirate ships. Yeah, somebody has to buy them a ship, right? And they went out and they captured Spanish galleons. They went up against these men of war. You know, but the others, but it was guarded, so they had to take down Spanish warships. But the booty was incredible. You know, so we're not there yet, are we?
No. Well, we'll get there in a second. Hold that thought. We're going to talk more about this because I keep bringing it up. Obviously, I like this subject. But
we're there now.
The pirates. Okay, so let's
take a break first.
We're going to take a break. Yeah, we're going to take a break, and we're going to remember, folks, if you want to see all the first of all, just the bullet points of this, it's available as a free PDF on the website at the bottom of your screen. You can also get Dr. Miles' brand new book on the subject. And Dr. Miles, what's the subject or the title of it again?
It's called Messianic Church Arising, and it is Volume 2 of Sons of Zion versus Sons of Grace.
Okay, very
so
good.
if you don't have both of them, you should get them both.
Absolutely,
A lot of people, thousands of people have read the first one and have been eagerly awaiting this volume.
Well, this is important information you don't normally get in your history book, and we have Dr. Miles to thank for that.
You don't get it.
And you don't get it. That's right. Now you can get it. And so it's all thanks to Dr. Miles. Thank you for bringing him here. I'm thanking you. You brought him here with your donations. I mean, that's the only way this show happens. We're going to ask that you would continue to do that so that this can be brought to other folks. We'll give you a couple of minutes. We'll be right back. Thank you for supporting Shabbat Night Live. We are into the final segment of our 4-episode series with Dr. Miles Jones, but I have a feeling we're not going to reach the end of the subject by the end of this 20 minutes we have here. So we're going to do more. We'll do, I don't know, maybe a bonus on the app. We'll do a love gift or something. So there's more to come. Don't worry. This isn't the end of
it's just
seeing
the
Dr. Miles.
tip of the iceberg, to be honest.
Yeah, really.
And a lot of these subjects, we just opened the door to them.
Yes.
They'd never really been investigated before, and we're finally to your favorite subject.
Oh, pirates. Let's talk about pirates.
Okay.
All right.
Well, we talked about how Jamaica had been, hugely populated by conversos, like 50% of the population. England invaded, and this was in the late 1600s, and they took over Jamaica, and they were trying to create an entree into the New World riches. Okay, and so they colonized several other places, islands, Bahamas, and other places, and British Guiana for one. So what they were trying to do was to do an entree, and they wanted to take some of the Spanish treasure away from them. So they invaded Jamaica, and then they invited the pirates of the region to make it their home, which they did. All right?
So this is why...
The pirates of Tortuga and other places, they flocked to them, as did the conversos, right? And it was the converso merchants, the Messianic merchants of Jamaica, who financed these privateer vessels because they were given letters of marque. Mm-hmm. And remember, these later were used by the United States government. It's enshrined in our Constitution, letters of marque, Article 1, Section 8, right? But they licensed these privateers because, after all, they were they shared the booty with them, so they're making money off them. It didn't cost them anything, right? So they had an instant navy to battle the Spanish, but also, guess what? The Messianics had a surrogate navy to battle this evil Spanish Empire for all the things they had done to them, taking their money. Because when they left Spain, the Jews and the Messianics, they were not allowed to take any money or goods they had with them, or their property, or to sell their property. So they were totally robbed by the Inquisition, which became very rich, and it became very, very corrupt. So they would shoot for the rich Messianics, to line their own pockets. So you have the Messianic merchants in Jamaica, and they're financing, and other places in the world, because they could get capital. Remember, they've created an international banking system.
Right.
As long as they're making money off of it, they can get capital for these ventures, and they did.
Credit from one place to another. That's where the credit system you mentioned was invented.
Yes.
Essentially.
Mm-hmm. And it was dangerous to carry. If you made a lot of money, it was dangerous to carry it in pirate waters. So, put it on deposit, and you can carry with you a draft, a money order, basically.
Deposit in the New World and go draft from it in the Old World.
Yeah, or vice versa.
Yeah.
You can. So, you were safe because you weren't carrying any valuables. So, it was brilliant.
A cashless society, go figure.
Yeah, the whole banking system was really brilliant. And the Messianics, the conversos, the Messianics, they pioneered this. They created it worldwide trade. And remember, this had just happened. They just discovered there was more than Europe in the world. So this had just happened. From China to India to the New World, they had the conversos were the masters of trade and commerce. And so basically, the Spanish would come in with the Inquisition and then start taking them down and taking over their businesses. Right? They came into Potosí and took them down, take over the silver trade, et cetera, and so on.
Yeah.
So they would really take these people out, burn them at the stake. Good way to get rid of them and seize their property because they were heretics, right? This quickly changed because there was no trust lost between the conversos in the New World and their Spanish overlords. There was no trust lost, but they were content with the status quo in the colonies. Pretty much left alone. The Inquisition followed them right away. But once they had invested the sweat and the money and the effort and the organizations of creating this international commerce, then the Spaniards came in with the Inquisition and wanted to take it away from them. So this changed the thinking of the converso nation, basically. And they realized they had to take out the Spanish Empire. And then the Inquisition would go down with them. And the English, they colluded with the English and said, look, come take Jamaica, you'll be welcomed. And they did. All right, and they created the pirate capital of the world there. All right, and invited all the other pirates to come down. Now they had this whole fleet of ships, and it was commanded by the Englishmen, first Mings, and then Henry Morgan, the famous pirate. And these were tough guys. And they convinced these very independent pirates. I mean, really, they elected their own captains and disposed of them when they chose. They're very, very democratic for pirates, right? Right? You know, and so Henry Morgan said, look, if we all band together, and, you know, taking down ships is great and all, but we can take all the settlements on the Spanish Main, which are flush with silver and gold, and there would be practically no resistance. Don't have to go up against a man of war with 24 guns. All right, so they started taking, the first time they did this, they came back with the equivalent of $2 million in current currency, $2 million in silver and gold. You know, and these were pirates, folks. They did slaughter, and they did torture, and they did burn, right? Down their villages and their towns, you know. They were the hated enemy, the Spanish. They even used the methods of the Inquisition. They even took the apparatus that they had liberated from the Inquisition prisons in the New World. And they used those same techniques, because before banks, what'd you do? If you had a bunch of silver, you'd hide it somewhere. So they would torture these Spanish, you know, until they gave up their hiding places. Okay, so these guys were bad guys. No, not all were like that. Many conversos were like Sinan, the Jewish pirate in the Mediterranean. Very honorable men. Yes, they fought, they killed, but they didn't torture, and they released their prisoners. You know, they didn't make them galley slaves, which was a sentence of death anyway, which is what the Inquisition often did. They'd chain you to an oar, and you would work until you died of fatigue, right? Which wasn't very long. If you lasted 2 years, that was a long time. But you have all this. So now they're visiting the same destruction and death. The surrogate fleet, the army, is visiting the same destruction and death on the Spanish that they had inflicted on the Messianics. Okay, so the result of this was that within 15 years, these guys broke the back of the Spanish Empire. Within 15 years. Wow. The Spanish Empire, I mean, these guys were riding high. I mean, you can't imagine the amount of treasure they were importing to Spain and Portugal, and then the other worldwide trade that they were doing, you know, slaves to the New World, silver to China, you know, silks and porcelain and Chinese trade goods back to they were just awash in money, Spain was. Okay, but it masked the fact that they expelled all their Jewish and Messianic professionals, because they were the doctors. You know, right? They were the professionals in every trade. And this devastated the economy of Spain, which was kept buoyed up by all this New World treasure coming in, right? But once they had neither the treasure nor the commerce, because the Messianics may have been 10-15% of the population, but they controlled 75% of the trade in any given port, right? So they were a huge presence as far as mercantilism. And really, the Spanish nobility looked down on mercantilism. They were lazy. They'd been made lazy, you know, by all this silver and gold coming in. They didn't have to work, right?
Makes sense.
So once they had neither the merchants nor the riches, Spain reverted to a third world country very rapidly. Really? So what happened is, these guys, they financed the American Revolution and the South American Revolution. Salvador went through all the nations of Europe, and he was financed by the conversos of Curacao, and because it was really rough, rugged at first. He hit some rough patches before he got this liberation movement going. Eventually, he was supported by conversos, and they financed him. He was able to raise an army in Venezuela, marched through gaining other, and you can bet that there were plenty of conversos in his army. And they went through each country, liberating each one. They wrote their new constitutions once they were liberated from Spain, which allowed for freedom of religion, which is also granted to them in the New World by the English, who were their allies, and in England, and by the Dutch, which were also very big in the trade at the time. They were a huge sea power, and they just declared their independence from Spain as well. So they had this huge navy. In fact, they captured one of the Spanish treasure fleets the whole fleet. It's the equivalent, and they took the equivalent of $2 billion in today's currency back to Holland, captured the whole fleet. These pirate raids were really, really draining the Spanish Empire, which was now dependent upon the gold and silver from the New World, and it was being taken away from them by who? By Messianics, by Messianic Privateers and pirates. Not all of them were Messianics, of course. It's kind of hard to tweak apart the communities and who are the good pirates and who are the bad pirates, right? But part of me says, well, the Spanish got what was coming to them, right? I don't condone it. I don't condone it, but a part of me says, well, what goes around comes around, right? They took the very apparatus and methods of the Inquisition, used it to torture the Spanish to give up their gold and silver. And so there was so much money going through Jamaica, that these pirate captains, they would shoe their horses with silver horseshoes. It was just incredible.
Just because they could.
A buccaneer might spend 3,000 silver ducats in a night, and then they'd go out and make more.
Wow.
I know, it's incredible, and it was very degenerate too. But it was an incredible era. They are the dreaded buccaneers of the high seas of the Caribbean. But they brought Spain to a standstill. Every one of those countries that was liberated, the Inquisition fires went out in those countries. They stopped the Inquisition in its tracks. The incredible torrent of misery that was the Inquisition slowed to a trickle, and then eventually sputtered out. Yes, it took more than 356 years it lasted, but towards the end, it was pretty weak. It became pretty weak pretty fast because of this. They were losing their countries because of the Inquisition, because of the harm they had done to them, and they responded in kind. This surrogate army that took out the Spanish towns and took all their treasure. Henry Morgan crossed the Isthmus of Panama through all those rugged mountains, those raging rivers, cutting their way through 25 miles of jungle, and attacked Panama, which was the world's gold and silver mart, and it was on the Pacific side, so, hey, it was safe, right? Well, not Henry Morgan. The haul was just uncountable. They just gutted the Spanish Empire, and then they lost all their colonies there, and then they were done for. But the Inquisition was put out. Actually, the headquarters of the Inquisition, towards the end of this century, 17th century, because the Inquisition was blackening the name of the apostate church throughout the world, throughout Europe. That was one reason for the Reformation, is the horrors of this Inquisition. We can't have this. In fact, John Calvin actually burnt Michael Servetus in Geneva, who had talked against him and debated with him, grabbed him, seized him, burned him at the stake, all right? So they were doing this, but the Protestant congregations really did not have the stomach for this. Isn't that why they were doing the Reformation? So this kind of stuff wouldn't go on anymore. So Protestants generally did not do that. They did burn plenty of witches. That became their thing, as many as 80,000. So they retained this template of the apostate church had created and given them, and that the Protestant church inherited, that it was okay to kill people in the name of God. For just for doctrinal differences. They didn't share your beliefs. It was okay to kill them. Their lives were forfeit, right? So, that we inherited this wormed over apostasy from the Catholic Church. So the new churches are really not exempt from this. They carried on many of these things. I mean, the Reformation was a great and good thing, but it was arrested. It did not go far enough, right? But back to the pirate story. Got another pirate story in there. These Messianic Privateers. Now, at the end of the war with the Spanish, the Treaty of Madrid, they disbanded the Buccaneers, but they came back. They came back because the American Revolution was happening, and the American colonies, they did not have a navy, so they called these privateers back.
Oh, is that where they came from?
Yeah,
okay.
It was the core of the Navy was created by 12 conversos, and they were Jewish and Messianics, and many of them had founded Jewish congregations. Now they had freedom of religion. So the Messianics and the Jews, the ship owners, they were still the ship owners and the masters of international commerce, all right? They created, and they had warships, right? Because they'd pirates, right? They had been privateers. So they had these warships, and that formed the core of the American Revolutionary Navy. You never hear about this, do you?
No, it's dull news to me.
Yeah, it started with a group of 12 prominent Hebrews, conversos and Jews. And they pitched in the American Revolution and formed the core of their Navy, which we probably would not, because the British were such a power, on the sea. We probably could not have survived that if we hadn't had this privateer Messianic Navy.
Wow.
So this happened even later in the War of 1812. You have the British invaded again and burned Washington. For those of you who don't know the story, they invaded and they burned Washington, and they were trying to take over New Orleans. This was probably the most crucial battle in the War of 1812. They're trying to take over New Orleans because by doing so, the mouth of the Mississippi River, they would control the whole Mississippi Basin, which is frankly about a third of the entire continental United States. It would go all the way up to Canada. All right, they would control navigation on the entire Mississippi River and would cut America off from their western expansion and basically control trade in a way that would be disastrous to the American nation. So this is really critical. And Andrew Jackson went down there with a handful of federal troops. He didn't have a lot of troops, but they formed this alliance with who? Well, with the frontiersmen, with the Cajuns, with slaves, with Indians, and pirates, right? So you had this motley crew. And Jean Lafitte was the head of the pirates, which were actually based, off in New Orleans and Galveston, places like that. And he was credited as the pirate who saved America, right? Because he kept the British Navy at bay so they couldn't just come in to the port of New Orleans and take it over and unload their ships, right? They had to do it away from the port and hike across through the swamps to get there. And by that time, Andrew Jackson and his motley crew had built earth bulwarks, and they soundly defeated the British Army, huge casualties. And they won this battle in a decisive way. So Jean Lafitte, who was a converso, he said it was his grandmother was his inspiration. She was Jewish. She gave him a Hebrew Bible that he carried with him everywhere. All right, and his grandfather had died in the Inquisition. He was a free thinker, he said, but that didn't stop the Inquisition from taking him and torturing him in order to give up names of other people. And so he died in the Inquisition prisons. And generally, when they count up the victims of the Inquisition, they don't count the many thousands of people who died of starvation and disease and injuries from torture in prison. They're just collateral damage, I guess. But they don't count those in the official count, right? And they don't count the thousands who had their breadwinner taken away from them and their property taken away and that starve in the streets because they've been reduced to beggary. So it was just a horrible, horrible institution of the Inquisition. So John Lafitte carried this, and so he came. Obviously, he was a dedicated opponent to the Spanish Empire, and there were still Spanish ships around that they were raiding. But in this case, he was fighting the British. Privateers came back out of the woodwork, financed by the Messianics, and Jews and Jews that had been granted religious freedom now. Washington even talked to them and said, "You're here with us. We have a religious freedom here. It's not, you're free to worship any way that you want." Remember, they had been kicked out of almost every country in Europe, so they were really fighting for the right. So the century began with them being basically illegal everywhere, including the conversos. Right, they've been kicked out of England, of France, of Germany, and other places. There are pogroms going all over the place. Inquisition in Spain, which spread to all parts of the New World. Right, so they had no place to go. So they went and they took their stand in the New World and created religious freedom in the New World, and also the English and the Dutch gave them rights, and eventually, the other countries did too, and they won the right for religious freedom in the New World for both conversos and for Jews and for everybody else. So they created a new world of not just religious freedom, but of opportunity, and economic freedom. They created a new world of commerce and things that have really lifted millions of people throughout the world. The whole idea of this, the covenantal contract that they had in the Puritans, for example, and the Sabbatarians and the other neo-Messianic groups that they had among their communities. This is what the Constitution was based on, this covenantal contract between government and the people. And it was a new thing at the time. It was very new. All right, and so, and this came to become the model for the world. It's lifted so many people out of poverty and out of oppression that it's not hard to recognize that this became really a golden age for literally billions of people now. These new ideas and these new opportunities and this idea that our Creator gives us the freedom to pursue our religion as we see fit.
Something worth saving, and now we know the history of it. So, Miles, I know we're not done here, but we will put the extra information we have elsewhere. So for now, we'll say...
You'll just have to have me back to do more.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
We're constantly uncovering new stuff. And we have our first publication, the Hebrew Gospels Publication Project, which is the Epistle of James.
Okay.
And we're going to follow that with Revelation and Acts.
Excellent.
And the Gospel of James, which most people don't even know about.
Well, the story is not done here. So we will continue, and thank you again for joining us on Shabbat Night Live.
I'm really glad to be here.
All righty, thank you for having us in your living room, in your kitchen, in your car, wherever you are watching this. And thank you again. And we'll see you next week for another edition of Shabbat Night Live. Until then, Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom, Torah fans. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with a friend. Tap the subscription button and the bell icon. And I promise to update weekly with in-depth biblical research. Be sure to download the new michaelrood.tv app for both mobile and home devices for even more commercial-free content.